Okay, Miss Chadwick again. So here we go. Now we're going to talk about the dreaded short answer response. You know, the ones you always skip. Don't skip them because you're going to rock them. And this is what we're going to use. We're going to use this little thing called a rage strategy. That's R-A-G-E. Yes, rage. We're going to rage on the short answer. And that stands for restate the question, answer the question, get evidence, and then E, explain how your evidence connects to your answer. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to break it down with the three little pigs. Because basically, you're going to read a story on the STARS test. Yes, a really boring, long story that you don't want to read, but you have to. And you're going to read it, and then they're going to ask you some great question. And you're going to have 10 lines to explain how brilliant you are. It's analysis, and you haven't done a lot of analysis up until this point in your writing for state exams. But really, it's a skill that you're going to use forever. So I'm glad they're testing you on it. But that means that you have to read a story and then tell me something about the author's craft, why the author did what they did. So we're going to do a little bit of a demonstration in just a minute, but I'm just going to walk you through the process of thinking through a short answer, going back to the rage strategy. So let's say you read The Three Little Pigs, and you have a question that looks like this. How would you describe the third little pig and the three little pigs? Well, right off the bat, we know that this is a characterization question because it's talking about one of the characters. Go figure. So when you think about that and characterization right off the bat, it could be about anything. It could be about tone, mood, symbolism, any of those literary elements that we preach to you over and over again. So this just happens to be on characterization. So we know there's basic traits when they're talking about characterization, and that is physical traits, emotional traits, and personal traits. You know, physical being what color hair did they have, or eyes, or were they tall, or were they short. Personal being, what do? Do they play basketball? Are they introverted? Or do they write music? What is their personal things that they do? And then emotional, are they angry? Are they melancholy? You know, how do they present themselves to people in their emotional, at their emotional level? So those are really kind of the three basic character traits that we talk about when we talk about characterization. So remember that as we're going through the Three Little Pig story. So they're asking us basically to describe that third little pig. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with our start with our R. We're going to start with our R, which means to restate the question. So if the question is, how would you describe the third little pig and the three little pigs? You restate that. You simply knock off the how would you. And you could just say, you could describe the third little pig and the three little pigs as, that's your R right there. Boom, check it off, it's done. But now we have to add that sentence. We have to add the A, the answer to the question. So really your R and your A, they're one sentence. They come together. So you could just imagine without one you can't have the other. Okay? So our restatement of the question was, one could describe the third little pig and the three little pigs as, and then fill in your blank and you have your answer. Done. R and A, we're over. Okay. So now that you figured out your answer, you have your first sentence written and you've explained to the audience where you're going with this answer. So the restatement of this question ended up in the fairy tale, The Three Little Pigs, the third pig was very wise. So I basically restated my question and I answered it. So I'm going to talk about his characteristic that I'm going to choose to talk about is that he's very wise. Okay, so we will move on to support that. We have to move on to our G, which is get evidence. And in that, when I say get evidence, it might be easier for you to understand that that really means to get a quote from the story. So far, there's two voices in this short answer. You've restated the prompt, so you borrowed from the text, and then you answered, those were your words, and now you got to go back to the text, and you got to borrow some more words from them. So this is their talk. So you have to bring in your quote, and you need to kind of embed that. And what I mean by that is you need to start the sentence with your own words and lead in to their words. Okay, so text evidence cannot be argued. All right, it supports your answer and it comes straight from the story. So let's start doing that. And here's the quote I'm going to use. Now remember, I'm going to introduce it with my own words and then add it. So remembering his mother's warning about a wolf, he, in quotation marks, here comes the text, builds his house on sturdy brick. This sentence begins with my words, and then I set up the quote, and then I bring in the actual words from the story. Okay? Don't worry, I'm going to show you how it reads all put together in just a second. Okay. All right, now that we have the quote, we have to connect it. We have to connect that quote to our answer. We have to do a little bit of explaining here. So, excuse me. So to begin this process, you kind of have to start with some commentary. So this fill in the blank action or trait, being wise, in this case, shows that. Or this quote that I used shows that. So that's kind of how you can lead into that explanation. I know some of you really struggle with it. Well, how do I start explaining that? Just use that. This proves that. This shows that. That's a great intro into that explanation. Okay, so I'll kind of give you my version. This decision shows that the third pig is intelligent because he built his house out of strong materials to outwit the wolf. Okay, so if I read this and it flowed start to finish with all my R-A-G-E, all my rage, this is how it would read. The prompt, remember, was how would you describe the third little pig and the three little pigs? In the fairy tale, the three little pigs, the third pig is very wise. Remembering his mother's warning about a wolf, he builds his house out of sturdy brick, and the wolf huffed and puffed but could not blow the house down. This decision shows that the third pig is intelligent because he's built his house out of strong materials to outwit the wolf. Bam, done. So just remember, rage. R, restate the question. A, answer the question. That's one sentence, two parts, one sentence. G, get your quote. And E, explain how that quote supports your answer. Okay, I'll show you a real example in just a minute.